I'm sure you've all seen the videos. 12-hour study days, study all-nighters with me, how to pull 10 hours of studying with no breaks. This needs to stop. We need to stop glamorising putting our mental health at risk. Hello, my name's Leah. I'm a fourth year medical student from the University of Sheffield, and today I'm going to be talking to you about toxic productivity, why I don't agree with long study days, and not only do I think they could be damaging potentially to our mental health, but also I don't think they're that efficient for studying and to retain knowledge. And then of course I'm going to jump into some tips that I find work better for me in terms of juggling my mental health and studying effectively. So as always, if you like this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up down below and to subscribe. And yeah, let's get on with it. Got my iced coffee as always, and I think the first thing we should talk about is one to me that I think is pretty obvious with these 12-hour study days and not taking breaks when you're studying. Mental exhaustion. Mental exhaustion is a fairly obvious one for me. How many times have you perhaps sat through, let's even say a class at school or a lecture? How long does it take for you to get bored? Really? Even if you really enjoy the subject, how long does it take for your brain to mentally turn off? An hour, 2 hours, maybe less, maybe slightly more. It's certainly not 12 hours, is it? This is because your brain is getting exhausted. Now, what do I mean by that? Put simply, mental exhaustion is when the brain receives an intense amount of stimulation, or it has to work at a high level of activity for too long. So what can mental fatigue and exhaustion cause? It can cause a reduction in your ability to think, to solve problems, and to regulate your own emotions. Now let's think about how those things will actually affect not just your studying, but your mental health. I think the first one's pretty self-explanatory. If we know that spending a lot of time studying very intently and putting a lot of pressure on our brains can lead to our inability to process information and to solve problems, how do we think that this is going to be beneficial towards our studying? Personally, I know when I'm tired and when I feel mentally drained, nothing is going to go into here. Absolutely nothing. I will end up reading the same sentences over and over. I will end up not spelling things correctly, and we make little mistakes. Now, 1 or 2 little mistakes might not seem too bad, but if they're going continuously over a long period of time, you're actually going to find your work where you're working at a very good level is slowly going down over time as you burn out. Now, I want to talk about a little scenario that I think would be quite beneficial if you're still thinking that studying for more time is going to be better for your learning. Say you put 100% of your mental capacity into 4 hours of learning. Still a long time, would definitely still take breaks. But let's say you put 100% of your effort, of your mental capacity, of your concentration into those 4 hours. Now let's say you want to study for 8 hours, so double the amount of time. But we know that your brain is not going to be able to hold 100% for 8 hours. So let's say it's going to be more likely to be 50%. 50% over 8 hours is going to be the same as 100% over 4. So I don't know about you, but I would rather do 4 hours of studying at 100% than 8 hours of studying at 50 to get the same results. Also, when we take into that we also would ideally in a day like to have time with our friends, family, follow our hobbies, get a good night's sleep, get a good eating habit, get good physical activity in there. If we only have 4 hours of time dedicated to study as opposed to 8 hours, a lot of these things are going to be a lot more possible. Also, I think it's really important to talk about mental health in this point because, as I said earlier, mental exhaustion and fatigue can lead to a decrease in our ability to process our emotions. If we're struggling to regulate and process our emotions, this is going to have a knock-on effect with our friends, family, and ultimately ourselves. If we're struggling to process our information with ourselves, then we're going to struggle with issues such as low mood, such as anxiety. And as someone that has gone through a depressive state in the past, I can say that a lot of this was down to putting too much pressure on myself and ultimately going through prolonged periods of mental exhaustion and burnout. I've always wanted to be one of those people that can have a great great time in medicine, to love medicine, to enjoy studying medicine. But I also want to be able to have a great time at spending time with my friends, with my family, spending time doing things I love, spending time doing activities that aren't related to medicine. So for me, it was about finding a routine where I could do that, where I could have both and also get the same amount of effort as if I was studying prolonged hours a day, but ultimately putting my mental health first instead. So, what's the secret? What's the secret to being able to study for less time and to do more things we enjoy? This is the secret. You need to learn how to work smarter and not harder. My key when it comes to studying is that I want to retain more information in less time. So how do I do this? Here's just some tips and tricks that I've found that work really well for me, and I'm not necessarily saying they'll work for you, but what I am saying is give something a go. Whether it's from this video or another video, try and find something and a routine which works best for you, which not only juggles your studying and spending time sort of working towards your education, but you can also balance everything else that you love at the same time. So here's some tips that work for me. I timetable everything. Now, when I say everything, I mean pretty much everything. For example, if I want to study today, I will put down in my timetable X time to X time studying, or I'm doing, I don't know, cardio, respiratory, and I'll break it into little chunks so I know exactly what I want to study. I will also, on that same timetable, prioritise exactly the same as medicine. I will put in things like go for a shower, do a workout, watch a film, go to the cinema, like things like that. I prioritise everything equally when I timetable things. And I will also write to-do lists ticking them off. And I won't say, oh, well, I need to make sure that this is prioritised so that it means I might not be able to watch a film tonight. No, I will timetable everything so that it's all possible for me to do everything I want to do in that day. Medicine is not prioritised in that for me. It's just a way of me breaking everything up so I can see that I've got the best opportunity of doing every task that I want to do. A good one for me that works very well, and I'm sure works for people if they get easily distracted, is having an app on your phone like Forest, or basically any phone locking app, so that when you're studying you are not being distracted by notifications or scrolling through Instagram or TikTok. That is a big one for me. I do not want to be scrolling through TikTok when I'm meant to be studying. The main reason for this is that 4 hours is going to quickly extend to 8 hours because I'm taking every few minutes to scroll through TikTok for 5 minutes, which ends up being more like half an hour to an hour. Now, for me, and something I'll make a video on in the future, is I changed my study technique. I used to be a huge note taker, and I'm not going to bash notes. I'm absolutely not going to bash notes in this video. If you're a note taker, don't worry. But what I am going to say is for me that I found that it didn't work well for being able to study for less time and retaining the same amount of information, because I'd spend so much time writing these notes over and over again and then probably never looking at them again. So something that worked really well for me is changing my study technique to active recall and spaced repetition, which I do through flashcards and through question banks. And doing this, I find I'm retaining that information because I'm going over it again and again and again, but I'm doing it in a lot less time than it would take me to write out some beautiful notes. So for me that works really well, and I can timetable it really well. I've been using Anki, but I also use Brainscape sometimes, and then I use PathMed, and I also use QuesMed, and these are the ones that I find have been really effective in me being able to get more from the time I put into studying. You may or may not have heard of Parkinson's law. I heard about Parkinson's law from Febe, and I actually think it's a really good way of summarising what I'm trying to tell you right now. What Parkinson's law basically means is that work expands to fill the time available for completion. So for example, if you give yourself 6 hours to complete a task, then that task will probably take you 6 hours. But if you give yourself 2 hours to complete a task, you will likely get it done within those 2 hours. This kind of ties in with my studying and my timetabling, because I like to make sure that I give myself not too much time to complete that studying, but also make sure I get exactly what I want to get done. This means that I'm not wasting time scrolling through TikTok thinking that I've got time to go make a drink leisurely, or to go and distract myself like I do, go see the cats, I know that I've got a set amount of time to get my work done. And if I do it this way, I'm going to have more time for the activities I do want to do without the pressure and the stress of workload sitting at the back of my mind. Also, just a little side note, I'm saying condense it, but still give yourself breaks. Your brain still needs time to rest. Something that I find really works well for me and for my mental health is to study intuitively. Now, what I mean by that is that if I feel really, really low, and I'm not talking like where I feel like, oh, I just can't be bothered today, or I just CBA to get out of bed and do this and that. I'm on about where I generally feel low in myself and I know my mental health's being affected. I will not push myself to study that day. A lot of the time for me, this can mean taking a day off, or a lot of the time I will actually take my weekends off and my evenings off anyway. But that doesn't mean that therefore I can't take time off in the week because I have taken a weekend off. I will always make sure that I'm studying in line with my mental health. Now, what does this mean? This means that sometimes when I'm in a really good mood and I'm feeling really positive and ready to sit down and smash some past med, then I will do just that. And I will, through my timetable, I will give myself the appropriate amount of time that I feel that I can smash it. However, if I'm not in this mood and I am not feeling too positive about studying, I will just start by timetabling a half morning, or timetabling even if it's just an hour, and then seeing what happens from there. Giving myself a free slot after that hour to say, if you feel like studying more, then go for it. If you're really not feeling like studying, take a step back. This for me works really well because I find that I don't feel the pressure, and I feel like when I feel pressured I don't perform as well because I'm constantly putting doubt into my mind. So what I find for me, especially when it's not exam season, is studying intuitively can be really beneficial to getting the most out of the time that you've dedicated. Now, ladies and gents, the most important tip: put your mental health first. That's the secret, ladies and gentlemen. That is the secret to studying efficiently. If your mental health is not where it should be, if you are not feeling mentally well, you are not going to be able to study efficiently. Take it from someone like me that had depression, fairly moderate depression last year, and would still try and push herself through way too much work. I was not retaining any information because I'd neglected my mental health. Put your mental health first and other things will fall into place. Make plans to go and do things that you've always wanted to do. Do not let medicine hold you back from that, because that will have an impact on your mental health. Give yourself time to read a book you've always wanted to read, take up a hobby, do all these fun things, but always put your mental health first. And I think what's also really important to note is that doesn't have to be doing all of these things. It could be as simple as, I want to get into bed early tonight and watch Netflix, or I want to paint my toenails or paint my fingernails. Like, do something for you that works in line with your mental health. And I know it's a bit cheesy, but I really stand by the statement that you can't pour from an empty cup. When I'm feeling low, I will not be able to put the same amount of energy into my revision than when I'm feeling happy, well-rounded. I feel like I've got a good balance in life. Because when I've got balance, I work way more effectively. I hope you enjoyed this video, all about me going on about toxic productivity and why I don't agree with it and what I think you should do instead. If you did enjoy, like I said earlier, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.